He'd pursed his lips and looked at her, long and hard, and said Colie would look good in anything. She'd gone inside the law office reluctantly, flushed and beaming after the unexpected pleasure of his company. J.C. worked full-time locally, but he went back overseas periodically to train troops in Iraq in police procedure. He was supposed to go back in a few months and do it all over again with a new group. J.C. worked as security chief for Ren Coulter, who had a huge cattle ranch, Skyhorn, outside Calhoun, Wyoming. Ren was ex-military as well, and he had somebody fill in for J.C. while he accommodated a former commander by drilling new recruits. Giving orders was something J.C. was very good at. He was also gorgeous. He had jet-black hair, cut short, and eyes so pale a gray that they glittered like silver. He was tall and muscular, but not like a bodybuilder. He had the physique of a rodeo cowboy, lithe and powerful. Colie liked to just sit and look at him when she had the opportunity. She'd never known anybody quite like him. He had a unique background, about which he rarely spoke. Rodney had told her that J.C.'s father was a member of the Blackfoot Nation up in Canada. His mother had been a little red-headed Irish woman. Quite an uncommon pairing, but it had produced a handsome child. J.C. never spoke of his father, Rodney added. Colie wanted a family of her own, badly. She and Rodney had lost their mother 2 years previously to bone cancer. It had taken her a long time to die. But even then, she'd been cheerful and upbeat around her children and her husband. Colie's father was a Methodist minister, a pillar of the community. Everybody loved him, not just his own congregation. They'd loved Colie's mother, too. The little woman, named Beth Louise, but called Ludi, had always been the first to arrive if there was a sick person who needed caring for, or a child who needed a temporary home. She'd even fostered dogs that were picked up by the local no-kill animal shelter while they waited for an adoptive family. All that had passed, along with her. The house was suddenly empty. Jared Thompson, Colie's father, had been almost suicidally depressed after his wife's death, but his faith had pulled him through. It was, he told Colie, not right to mourn someone who had lived such a full life and had gone on to a happier, more wonderful place. Death was not the end for people of faith. They simply had to accept that people died for reasons that were, perhaps, not quite clear to those left behind. Colie and Rodney had grieved too. Rodney had been overseas for almost 4 years, with only brief visits. He couldn't come home for his mother's funeral, although he Skyped with his father and sister after the services. He was a sweet, biddable boy until he went into the service. When he came home, he was different. Colie couldn't figure out why. He became fixated on fancy cars and designer clothes, neither of which fit in his small budget. He'd obtained a job at the local hardware store when he came home, because it was owned by a friend of the Reverend Thompson. Rodney seemed to be a natural salesman, but he complained all the time about getting minimum wage. He wanted more. He was never satisfied with anything for long. The one thing that bothered Colie most was that her brother wasn't quite lucid most of the time. He had red-rimmed eyes, and sometimes he staggered. She worried that he might have been hurt overseas and wasn't telling them. She knew it wasn't from alcohol because Rodney almost never took a drink. It was puzzling. During Rodney's tour of duty in the Middle East, J.C. and Rodney hung out together when Rodney was off duty. Rod didn't write often, but when he did, he mentioned things he and J.C. had done overseas during the time J.C. was there. They went out on the town when Rodney was on liberty. Odd thing about J.C., Rodney had commented. He never drank hard liquor.